Enjoy poverty, cheap loser. My wife and her millionaire lover framed me, got me fired from my €300,000 engineer job, discarded me like trash, then came crawling back when a blood test revealed who I really was. At 39 years old working as a janitor, I cut my hand and went to the emergency room. The doctor examined my blood tests and fell silent. He called 3 specialists who stared at me. "Sir, your DNA shows something impossible. You're related to," what he said made my head spin. "My name's Javier, I'm 39 years old, and if you look at my life right now you'd think I was always the janitor of an old building on the outskirts of Madrid. What no one sees when I mop the hallway is that a few years ago I was making €300,000 a year as a senior engineer at a multinational tech company. I had a glass office company stock and a future that sounded like a success story. I also had a wife, Laura, and a family-in-law that never missed a chance to remind me that despite the money, I was still the boy from the poor neighborhood. I'm an only child. My parents are simple people from a working-class neighborhood. They always taught me to work and not to owe anyone anything. They're not the problem in this story. The word family that destroyed me came with another last name, Laura's. The first time her mother looked at me like I was an intruder was at a Sunday dinner when we were still dating. I was 27. I had just gotten my first promotion. "Mom, do you remember I told you Javi got a raise?" Laura said, smiling and squeezing my hand under the table. Her mother scanned me from head to toe without stopping to cut her steak. "Uh-huh," she said drily. "And what's his salary?" Because it's one thing to be a lucky little employee and quite another to be a man who can support a family. She tossed out the phrase as if nothing, as if she were commenting on the weather. I felt a knot in my stomach. Her father didn't even look up from his wine glass. "Mom, please," Laura protested. "Javi's building a career. Not everyone is born with a paid-off apartment." Laura's mother let out a small laugh. "Honey, I'm just saying it like it is. In this life, some are born to command money, and others are born to ask for it. It's better you have that clear before you get married." The word married hit me harder than the comment. Not because the idea scared me, but because she said it as if it were a contract where I had to prove I deserved to be there. I swallowed hard. "I haven't asked anyone for money," I said slowly. "Everything I have I've earned by working." Her mother dropped her fork on the plate with a thud. Yet she remarked, "Life is long, Javier. We'll see where you are at 40. She said it staring at me as if she were casting a curse. I didn't know it then, but that woman was going to fulfill her own prophecy in the most twisted way possible. Years later, that phrase was still with me when I found myself standing in the gray janitor's uniform in the emergency room of a public hospital. I had my hand wrapped in a blood-soaked paper towel. A broken piece of glass from the entrance had cut me deep. My fingers were trembling not just from the pain, but from something else I couldn't name. Something between exhaustion and shame. A young nurse pointed me to a stretcher. "Sit there, please. We'll be with you in a moment." I let myself fall looking at the fluorescent light flickering on the ceiling. "We'll see where you are at 40. 39, janitor. Cut open hand. Emergency room that smelled of cheap disinfectant." The door opened, and a doctor of about 50 came in with glasses slipping down his nose. "Javier Santos, right?" He looked at the chart. "Let's see that hand." He unwrapped it carefully. "It's nothing. We'll close this up with a few stitches, and you'll be fine," he murmured. "Are you on any medication, any chronic illness?" "No," I replied, "just cheap coffee." I tried to joke, but it sounded sad. "They drew blood for protocol," they said. "Routine analysis." I nodded without thinking. I was used to signing things without reading too much. Sick leave forms, trash contracts, endless forms. Almost an hour passed. I was answering messages from the building staff WhatsApp group, things like, "Hey, don't come back today, we've covered your shift." Suddenly, the same doctor came in again. This time he wasn't alone. Behind him were 3 other men in white coats with serious faces. They closed the door. They weren't smiling. I felt the air in the room change. "Mr. Santos," the doctor began, placing the folder on the table. "There's something in your analysis that we need to discuss with you." I sat up, my heart racing. "Is it something bad?" The doctor hesitated. He looked at the other 3. One of them, younger with an accent I couldn't place, crossed his arms. "It's not bad in the way you're thinking," he said finally. "It's unusual." The older one cleared his throat. "You see," he continued, "your DNA shows something that in theory is impossible. We've repeated it 3 times. We've cross-referenced it with donor databases, with previous studies, with court records." He paused. I started to feel a ringing in my ears. Mr. Santos, he said at last, you're directly related to a person who, according to all official documents, shouldn't have any kinship with you. He leaned in a little. And we're not talking about just any donor, we're talking about someone very well known. I felt the room spin, and without knowing why, the face that came to my mind wasn't my parents', it was my ex-wife's, Laura's. Smiling with contempt while her mother repeated in the background, in this life, some command money, and some ask for it. I always thought I knew which side I was on. I was wrong, and I had no idea by how much. To understand how I ended up bleeding in an emergency room and listening to doctors talk about my DNA, I have to go back. Many years ago, I was the pride of the neighborhood, the kid who came from nowhere and ended up working for a big tech company, making more than any of my friends could imagine. I studied computer engineering at a public university on a scholarship, working nights at a call center and weekends delivering food. My parents couldn't help me, but they didn't demand it either. Their only phrase was, "Son, you study. Don't let them have you by the neck your whole life." And I studied. I broke my back learning everything I could. At 30, I was hired by a European multinational with an office in Madrid, working on big projects with a salary that went up every year with bonuses, stock options, everything. That's where I met Laura. She worked in marketing at a small agency that ran campaigns for our company. Pretty smart, she spoke 3 languages and had that energy of a person who walks into a place and everyone turns around. The first time we went out, she laughed when I told her how long it took me to finish my degree. 8 years, I said. Between jobs and scholarships, that's what it took. That's not a delay, she replied, taking a sip of her drink. That's resilience. I like men who know how to endure. I fell in love with that sentence like an idiot. Over time, I discovered that when Laura talked about enduring, she didn't mean sleepless nights or impossible exams. She meant putting up with her family, their standard of living, and their whims. My in-laws lived in a huge apartment downtown that they always called the family apartment, as if that justified everything. Laura's father had owned a distribution company that he sold just before the crisis. It's not that they were millionaires, but they acted like they were. We've worked enough, her father would say. Now it's your turn to push. You meant mostly me. When Laura and I got married, her parents insisted we buy an apartment up to their standards. No suburban neighborhoods, her mother said, wrinkling her nose. Laura grew up downtown. She's not going to live surrounded by mechanic shops. Mom, Javi's neighborhood isn't a dump. She defended herself. I didn't say that, the other one smiled. But there are levels, darling. I was already earning well. We could afford a large mortgage. We did it. I signed papers with a mix of fear and pride. It was the kind of apartment my teenage self only saw from the bus. At first, I didn't mind that almost everything came out of my account. Laura said her agency paid poorly, that it would get better, that her career was about to take off. I just need time, she'd repeat. You're the stable one, I'm the one who's going to do something big. And I'd nod. I paid the installments, the renovations, the car, the vacations, because if we don't go on vacation once a year, why do we work? I started sending money to my parents discreetly too. You don't have to, son, my mother would say. Hush, and buy a new fridge, I'd reply. Meanwhile, my in-laws were dedicated to commenting on everything as if they were conducting a moral audit. Is that new, Laura? Her mother would ask, looking at a dress. I paid for it myself, Laura would lie sometimes, even though I knew it had come off my card. Oh, thank goodness Javi is a good provider, her father would intervene, laughing. There are so many lazy bums these days. It was all said in jest. Always in good fun, but it added up, and it was heavy. The turning point came when Laura decided she was tired of working for others. I want to start my own project, she told me one night, throwing a magazine on the table. An online store for sustainable clothing. We have the contacts, Javi. I have an eye for campaigns. You have the financial stability. It's the right time. I was exhausted from work, but I looked at her and saw that sparkle in her eyes that made me fall in love. Okay, I said. What do you need? The answer was everything. She needed me to sign for the loan because my paycheck was the only serious one. She needed me to advance money for stock, a website, photo shoots, influencers. Every time I looked worried, she'd hug me. It's an investment, she'd whisper. When this works out, you can quit your job if you want. We'll do it together. What she didn't say was that together included another person. His name was Sergio. I met him at a networking lunch. He was one of those guys who smells of expensive cologne and talks as if the world belongs to him by default. Investor, entrepreneur, partner in several startups. He was 10 years older than us and had an ego 3 times as big. Sergio thinks this can scale a lot. Laura told me after the lunch. He wants to help us with contacts with suppliers. He says if we do things right in 2 years, we could be making a fortune. And what does he want in return? I asked half-jokingly. A percentage, I guess, she replied. Like everyone else. But don't worry, I'm not stupid. She wasn't. It's just that her definition of stupid and mine didn't match. Sergio started appearing in conversations and photos in late meetings at the office and on express trips to Barcelona to see suppliers. I worked more and more. My company had put me in charge of a key project with an international client. The salary went up, the stress too. Sometimes I'd come home and find her on the couch, phone in hand, laughing at something Sergio had sent. Everything okay? I'd ask. Yes, it's just work, she'd answer without looking up. Don't be jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was tired, and honestly I trusted her. I believed that if I was sacrificing my health and my hours to sustain our life, she was doing the same on her end. Spoiler no. The first serious crack wasn't because of a photo or a message, it was because of a comment from her mother again at a family meal. The four of us were at the table, and I was saying that there was talk of a possible restructuring at the company, changes on the board, things like that. Well, whatever happens, her mother said, cutting her meat. Luckily, Laura has Sergio. A strange silence fell. What do you mean by luckily? I asked, trying to sound light. She looked up, surprised that I'd asked. Because he's on another level. Javier, she said, as if explaining something obvious. Contacts, investments, assets. He doesn't depend on a paycheck like you. You know how these companies are. Today they love you, tomorrow they kick you out. Laura put down her fork. Mom, what? The other replied. I'm just saying it's good to have friends in high places, honey. Just in case, friends in high places. I kept eating, but that phrase stuck with me. I wouldn't know until much later how literal it was. The explosion came in 3 acts. The first was at the office. One random Monday, my boss asked me to come to a small meeting room. There was someone from Human Resources and a man I didn't know, expensive suit, fake smile. Javier, sit down, please, my boss said. I did. My legs were shaking without knowing why. The woman from Human Resources started talking about concerns about information that had reached the company about a possible conflict of interest. The man in the suit put some papers on the table. We've received proof that you've shared sensitive internal documentation with third parties, he said. Specifically with a potential competitor. His finger pointed to a name in a printed email. Sergio. I felt a chill on the back of my neck. That's not true, I said immediately. I've never shared anything. We have emails sent from your account, the man replied. Dates, attachments. Everything matches. I looked at the papers. It was my address, yes, but I didn't remember the messages. Not the tone, not the way of writing. This is doctored, I stammered. I didn't write this. My boss sighed without looking me in the eye. The board is very nervous, he said. This is a very important client. We have to act fast. Fast meant this. They asked me to hand over my badge, my laptop, my access. While we investigate, they said, but the termination letter was already prepared. Due to the gravity of the accusations and to protect the company, we are terminating your services with immediate effect, the Human Resources woman read almost from memory. My €300,000 salary disappeared in one morning. I left the building with a cardboard box and the feeling that the ground had disappeared from under my feet. Act 2, home. Laura was in the living room when I arrived mid-afternoon with the box still in my hand. What are you doing here so early? She asked. I've been fired, I said directly, because I didn't have the energy for games. She stood up, her eyes wide. What do you mean you've been fired? Why? I told her everything. The emails, the conflict of interest, Sergio's name on the papers. As I spoke, her face was changing. From shock to something harder to read. It wasn't pure surprise. A calculation, Laura. I said when I finished. Tell me the truth. Have you used my computer, my account, something? She crossed her arms. Are you accusing me of something? She replied, offended. I'm trying to understand what happened. What happened, she said in a cold voice, is that you who always brag about how smart you are have played with fire in a company that doesn't forgive mistakes. Maybe you weren't as indispensable as you thought. That phrase hurt more than the termination letter. I've worked like an animal for us, I replied. For this apartment, for your business, for everything. And what do you want, a medal? She replied, raising her voice. I've worked too, Javi. If they caught you doing something dirty, don't drag me into it. I haven't done anything dirty, I insisted. She laughed, a short, joyless laugh. Well, it seems your company doesn't think so. Act 3, the true face. 2 days later, I received a message from Laura. We need to talk. Is Sergio there too? Come over. They met at her parents' apartment. Bad sign. When I entered, the 3 of them were there, Laura, her parents, and Sergio, sitting with his legs crossed, as if the place were his living room. Javier, he greeted smiling. Sit down. I didn't sit. What's going on? I asked. Her mother spoke first. What's happening is that my daughter can't ruin her life because of your irresponsible decisions. She said, you've lost a job any man would kill to have. I haven't lost anything, I corrected. I've been set up. Of course, Sergio intervened with a condescending tone. There's always a conspiracy, isn't there? Look, Javier, the business world is tough. Sometimes people fall. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. I stared at him. Funny that your name appears in the fake emails. Then his smile tensed slightly. There are a lot of us in the industry, he replied. Not everything revolves around you. Laura stood up. It doesn't matter who did what she said. The fact is right now, we don't have the income level we had before. And I'm not going to lower my standard of living because you didn't know how to take care of your job. Didn't know how to take care. I repeated incredulously. Do you hear yourself? Her father leaned forward. Son, he said, using that word like a weapon. The banks don't wait. The mortgage is still due. The loan for the shop too. You're the one on the title. Legally, you're responsible. There it was. The real problem for them wasn't that I had lost my job. It was that they might be left without someone to pay for their whims disguised as stability. I'll find another job, I said. I'll do whatever it takes, but I need you to be aware that right now I can't keep paying for everything like before. Laura looked at me as if I'd said I was planning to burn down the apartment. No, she said, I'm not going to live like a poor person. Not after I've tasted something else. Then sell things, cut expenses, close the shop. I started. Her mother slammed the table. You're selfish, she screamed. Do you know how much Laura has invested in her project? How much she's risked? Whatever has been invested, I took a deep breath, I put it in. From my account, from my job. A thick silence fell. It was Sergio who broke it. Look, Javier, he said, I'm going to be very clear with you. Laura and I have been working together for a while very closely. And we've decided that the healthiest thing is to separate your lives. I felt a blow to my chest. Separate, I whispered. Laura wasn't looking at me. I want a divorce, she said at last. And I want to keep the apartment. It's the most logical thing. You can go to something more. According to your new situation. That was the breaking point. I felt something inside me break, but not in the sense of I'm falling apart, more like when a taut rope snaps, and suddenly everything goes quiet. I took out my phone, opened the folder where I kept photos of transfers, receipts, contracts, emails. The logical thing, I said calmly with a calm I didn't know I had, is for the apartment to be sold and the proceeds split. It's in both our names, half and half. I have all the statements of who paid for what. And the logical thing will also be that when I prove those emails are fake and that someone used my account, the company will be very interested in who had access to my computer at home. Sergio leaned back. Are you threatening us? He asked. No, I replied. I'm setting boundaries. For the first time in 10 years. My voice sounded different. Firm. I'm not going to be your ATM anymore, I added. Nor your safety net. You want a divorce? We'll do it legally. You want the apartment? We'll talk to lawyers. But this deciding about my life in your living room is over. I looked at my mother-in-law as if I were a child who had brought home bad grades. Laura pursed her lips. You're going to regret this, she whispered. I'm already regretting it, I answered. That's why it ends today. I left that apartment knowing I had just jumped from a burning building without knowing if there was a net below. What I didn't imagine was that the fall would be so long. The divorce was dirty. They tried everything, accusing me of psychological abuse, saying I wanted to leave her on the street, even insinuating I had diverted money from the company to Laura's shop. I responded with papers, bank statements, emails, contracts. My lawyer kept repeating, you're the unicorn of divorce cases, Javier. You're the guy who saved everything. But although I won some battles, I didn't get the apartment entirely. We just had to sell it and split it. I lost the war that hurt the most my life as I knew it. With the firing staining my name, finding a similar position was almost impossible. There was always an excuse. The profile is very interesting, but the team is full right now. We've decided to go with another candidate. We love your experience, but the economic situation. Lies. In 2 interviews, one of the recruiters dared to be honest. There are strange rumors about how you left your old company, he said. And you know how this sector is small. We don't want problems. Meanwhile, the savings were running out. Half of what we got from the apartment went to lawyers' taxes and closing debts. The other half was diluted over a couple of years living alone, without a steady salary, trying to start small projects that never took off. Laura, on the other hand, was flourishing. On social media, at least. Photos of trips, dinners, stories with Sergio in luxury hotels. One night, after another failed interview, I received her message. It was the first time she'd written to me in months beyond court matters. "I've heard you're looking for work, anything?" There was a laughing emoji. Before I could block her, the next one came. "Enjoy poverty, winky face." I looked at it for a long time. I could have gotten into an argument, insulted her, said things I'd been holding back for a long time. Instead, I took a screenshot and blocked her. The next morning, I signed the contract as a janitor for an office building. Fair salary, split shifts, nothing glamorous, but it was a job. My friends from the neighborhood looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. "You used to make what 5 of us made together," one said one night. "And look at you working here." "It means I can work here," I replied, "and keep getting up." I wasn't just saying it to be nice. It was a way of convincing myself I wasn't a walking failure. The hand injury came on a Thursday. A glass pane in the doorway had been broken for a while. I had mentioned it 1,000 times to the building manager, but budget board meeting, whatever. That day someone slammed the door too hard. The piece of glass came loose, and I instinctively put my hand out. It cut deep. The stitches, the blood, the emergency room. I thought the worst part of that day was the injury. It wasn't. We go back to the room with the doctors. "What do you mean by related?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling. The main doctor opened the folder. "Our systems are connected to several genetic databases for research purposes," he explained. "Organ donation, studies of hereditary diseases, things like that. A very specific marker appears in your sample that almost 100% matches another profile registered years ago. And that's rare?" "It's rare for the coincidence to be so high," the younger one replied. "We're talking about direct, first-degree kinship. Father-son, mother-son, not distant cousins." I felt my heart pounding against my ribs. "But my parents—" I started. "That's the next thing we have to ask," the doctor interrupted. "Is your biological father named Antonio Santos?" "Yes," I nodded. "Well, I think so. I've always known him as my father." They looked at each other. "And your mother?" "Rosa." The doctor shook his head slightly. "The name that appears in the database is none of those," he said. "It's another one." He passed the sheet to me. I read Ricardo Villalba. The first time I saw that name was many years before on a giant screen when our company announced the arrival of a new member to the investment board. A shark of finance, a man who bought and sold companies like he changed shirts. The same Ricardo Villalba who, according to the newspapers, had died without any recognized children. The same one whose fortune had gone to foundations and social projects. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "I don't, this isn't." The doctor pointed to the figures. "Genetics doesn't usually make mistakes," he replied. "People can make mistakes, papers, stories they tell us, but not DNA." I felt like I couldn't breathe. My parents, my life, the idea of who I was. Everything wavered. "And what am I supposed to do with this?" I asked, almost laughing, because I can't just go somewhere and say, "Hi, I'm the lost son of the dead millionaire." The doctor frowned. "We're not telling you what to do," he said. "Just that this exists. And there's something else." Of course there was. "The database we cross-referenced the information with," he added, "comes from a study done as a result of a lawsuit over an inheritance. Someone tried to prove they were Mr. Villalba's son. The tests ruled it out, but the base sample was registered." "A lawsuit?" I repeated. "Who?" The doctor hesitated. "We can't give you names just like that," he replied. "There's confidentiality." But he looked at me with a certain compassion. "Let's just say the story is complicated. There were changes on the board of your former company right after Mr. Villalba's death." No, I thought of Sergio, of the emails of my dismissal. I felt how all the pieces I hadn't understood for years were slowly starting to make sense. In the most twisted way. "Are you saying someone claimed to be Villalba's son, lost, and still ended up on the company's board?" I asked, my voice colder than I felt. The doctor didn't answer. He didn't have to. I already knew the name that wanted to come out of my mouth. Sergio. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my mother, my father, about Laura, about Sergio, about my ruined career. I took out my phone, opened Google. I typed lawsuit, inheritance, Villalba. Sergio. There was no need for a web of news articles. They were still there, buried among articles from years ago. A Madrid businessman tries to prove in court that he is the son of magnate Ricardo Villalba. Blurred photos, initials, but I recognized the smile. He failed to prove it. And yet years later, he was sitting next to my ex-wife, deciding that I was the poor, useless one, and he was the savior. And now a cheap emergency room blood test said that the lost son was me. I laughed. A hollow, ugly sound. "Perfect," I murmured. "From engineer to janitor, from janitor to cheap soap opera." I turned off my phone And there in the middle of all that madness, I had an idea that brought back a spark I thought was dead. I wasn't going to use that information to go for the money. At least not at first. I was going to use it for something much simpler. To close once and for all the door that Laura and her world had left open in my head. The first thing was to talk to my parents. I went to their usual apartment, the one in the neighborhood with its old furniture and its smell of stew. My mother received me with a hug. "What happened to your hand, son?" "It's nothing," I replied. "But we need to talk about something that's not easy at all." We sat down. I told them everything calmly without reproaches. The analysis, the name, the coincidences. My father remained silent. My mother started crying before I finished. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I wanted to tell you the truth, but there was always a later, a when you're older. And then everything happened so fast." "Is it true?" I asked, looking into her eyes. "Is it in Villalba?" My mother nodded, trembling. "It was a mistake," she said. "One night many years ago, I was cleaning offices. How was he? He treated me well. He listened to me. I was angry with your father. We had problems. I made a mistake. Then I realized I was pregnant, and I was afraid of losing everything." My father's eyes were shining, but not with anger, but with something else I couldn't identify. "I knew," he said. "At last. Not because anyone told me. I just knew. But I saw you born, I saw you grow up, and I never needed a piece of paper to know you were my son." His voice broke. "If you want to hate us," he added, "I'll understand. But I've never seen you as anyone else's son." I was quiet for a while. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I just need time to understand who I am in all this." My mother took my good hand. "You're Javier," she said. "You're our son. You're the boy who killed himself studying to be an engineer. You're the one who helped us when we didn't even have enough to fix the boiler. The rest is money and last names. And look where that obsession has led us all." I thought of Laura, of her mother, of Sergio. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace with my parents. The war wasn't with them, it was with the idea that my worth depended on how much money I could put on a table. I'm not going to lie, knowing that in theory, I could claim part of a multi-million-dollar inheritance tempted me. I talked to lawyers. They told me the case was complicated, that time had passed, that legally everything was tightly sealed, but that yes, the analysis opened doors that didn't exist before. Meanwhile, someone else found out about the story. Laura, I don't know how she found out. I guess in this country things fly, especially when a big last name is involved. One day my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I answered out of inertia. "Yes, Javi." Her voice. I was about to hang up. I didn't. "What do you want?" "I've heard things," she said, "about you, about Villalba." "Is it true?" I started to laugh. How fast gossip travels in certain circles. I replied, "Did Sergio tell you between drinks?" She was silent for a few seconds. "Look, I know everything ended badly between us," she began. "But if this is true, we could." "No," I cut her off. "There is no we could. There is no us." "Don't be childish," she snapped. "This is big, Javi. You could help a lot of people. You could invest in the business, relaunch it." "We could, Laura," I said slowly. "The last time you wrote to me, it was to say enjoy poverty. Remember?" Silence. "I have the screenshot." I added. "I saved it. Not because it amused me, but to remind myself exactly who you are when you have power." I noticed my voice didn't tremble. Not even a little. "Now that it smells like money, you show up talking about we could. As if you hadn't helped destroy my career. As if you and Sergio hadn't used my name, my data, my job to climb up yourselves." "That's not how it was," she stammered. "I'm not interested in your version," I replied. "I'm interested in my peace, and that at last is not for sale." I took a deep breath. "If I ever do anything with this new last name," I continued, "it will be for my parents, the ones who raised me on minimal wages, not for those who laughed at me for feeding my own. It will be to live peacefully, not to join your parade of appearances." "Javi, you're being very radical." She tried. "We can be adults." "We can. You were very adult when you let them fire me." I interrupted her. "When you sat down with a guy who claimed to be a millionaire's son, and you both played games to take everything from me, because you thought I had nothing left to lose." I adjusted the phone in my bandaged hand, looking at the doorway I was cleaning. "My current reality, my gray uniform." "You were wrong," I said. "I had something you've never had. The ability to start from scratch without stepping on anyone. And now I have something else, limits." There was a sigh on the other end. "You're going to regret this," she said at last in a whisper that no longer sounded so confident. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'd rather regret saying no to people like you than spend the rest of my life regretting letting myself be used." I hung up. I blocked the number. I didn't take a screenshot. I didn't need to this time. Today I still work as a janitor, at least for now. I still live in a smaller apartment in a more humble neighborhood. My hands are rougher. My bank account doesn't impress anyone, but I sleep.